Sweet, it worked. Okay.
Cool.
So today we're going to be talking about making mythology. Some of the stuff you will probably have already heard before, some of it may be unusual. So, obviously the first thing, and when I say mythology, I'm going to talk about all religions. Yes, I know that seems rude to people who actually believe in that religion, but let's be real here. Greek mythology was once a real worship religion.
And kind of
So,
still is to some people.
and some people still believe in it. So that's why I'm like, I'm just going to talk about this in generalized terms. Like, hey, I'm a Christian. I believe in God, but someone else might think it's a mythology to them. So, like, I'm just going to talk about it in generalized terms. Please don't be offended. Thank you. That's my little asterisk before I get talking. Okay, so with mythology, you first want to talk about, is yours a singular deity or are there multiple deities? That is a big decision. Why? Because it is going to fundamentally change how you structure things. Mainly, with mythologies that have multiple deities tend to have much more democratic structures to their culture. Why? Because of the fact that they see multiple leaders as balancing each other out. Whereas most cultures that have a singular deity prefer things like kings, presidents, dictators, things like that, a singular entity being in charge, because it kind of emulates the god they believe in. Um, Makes sense, right? A lot of this is going to be cultural reflections of what you want. So, for example, if you want a really bad A MC who's a female, you probably want to have a matriarchy. Or if you want her to be a bad A female who's like totally sticking it to the patriarchy, you can have a patriarchy, but then you got to explain why she feels she can stand up for herself. Because a lot of times, social
Because she's
pressure told you to
orphan.
just sit down, stay down, shut up, right? And so, as a result of that, you got to talk about why she's able to do this. Is there something culturally that makes it work? For example, in Greek mythos, there were a lot of powerful female deities. And so, even though they were kind of like stay at home and do your thing, they also were like, if a woman decides to, rise up and be crazy, we'll accept it as long as she's not too crazy. Because we have things like Athena and Artemis and all of these really powerful female figures.
And then there's Cersei.
And then there are opposite figures where it's like Circe and Calypso, and it's like, guess what? I am seductive and I will murder you in your sleep. So you can also, again, show how they picture cultures of women. Artemis, she's this bad A huntress, but she also never gets married. So they're kind of intimating, hey, if you're a warrior, you'll probably be single forever. Same thing with Athena, also single forever. Cultural messaging much? Where they're like, you can be a bad A woman, but no, you will be single. No one will want you, which is rude, but it's what the culture believed. So,
If I'm a feminist, then I'm fine doing that.
so it's like these cultural beliefs do get kind of embedded into how their mythology works. And it's important to make sure you keep that in mind and you aren't just saying, oh, it's a matriarchy, but for some reason there's a male god in charge of their pantheon. That makes no sense. You got to have it reflective. Or maybe there was a male god in charge and one of the female gods overthrew them or something. It does tend to reflect their society. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
And what you said made me think of something that's also related to Greek mythology.
Yeah. Sure.
And the Amazons.
Yes.
With my brain's blinking, but it has something to do with Aries.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. So there are a lot of things in mythology, even just with side stories and things like that, like with the powerful Amazon warriors and different things like that. A lot of people theorize because there were matriarchal cultures in South America that anyone who went to South America, there were these powerful Amazon warrior ladies, and they were like, hey, these guys are descended from Aries clearly because they're kick butt and take names. And so as a result of that, there a lot of people justified even other cultures based on their own mythology. And so a lot of times even victories and losses in battle were seen as reflections of their own um, belief or lack thereof. A lot of times if a person could see that a battle was going badly, they would find some sort of non-believing scapegoat and be like, he didn't worship enough, so it's his fault.
It's all just his fault. It totally is.
Or if they won the battle, they'd be like, it's because we're so faithful and awesome. Like, a lot of times people put their faith so hard into it that they make it kind of their personality almost. And that can be very interesting as well. I would say be careful of those kind of characters because they can get annoying on occasion. But that doesn't mean you can't have a character like that. Just be warned. They can be obnoxious. All right. So Do they have some sort of tome of religion? What kind of things do they believe? Do they believe that their god is merciful? Do they believe that their goddess is vengeful? Why do they believe that? Why is that important to them? Why does that reflect kind of what's going on here? For example, Aztecs actually had the goddess of war also be the goddess of childbirth, and it was believed that if you died in childbirth, it was the same as dying in war. You'd kind of go to their version of, you know, the ultimate heaven as a result of that. And so that is a very unique cultural perspective that is reflected through their deities and through their beliefs. With that being said, what kind of ways do they record their religion? Because most people do record their religion somehow. So, how is it recorded? For the Norse people, it was typically on wood or on some sort of rune stones or different things like that. They preferred a much more permanent, unerasable solution. Um, it kind of in some ways also reflects their culture of being kind of stubborn and, like, we got this. And even though that is awesome and everything, it very much reflects on the fact that they're like, we're not going to carve this on some like sad little paper that could get destroyed easily in a fire. Now we're going to put this on a giant tree or a big rock. It's not getting erased. We got this. Whereas with European culture, it was a much more gentle kind of thing. And so even though, yes, they'd go off and crusade and kill people, they'd always believed it was in the name of a merciful almighty God. And so a lot of times they added art to their tomes, right? And they added a lot of like fluid writing that was very, very like fanciful. And they did it on this vellum, beautiful, delicate paper, And that also kind of reflected their view of God and their own view of society. Um, or you can go the other route and say that it's recorded in a totally different way. For example, because of the fact that Native Americans respected, or indigenous peoples, however you want to phrase it best, I know the terminology's changed over the years. A lot of indigenous peoples were strictly verbal. And the reason why is because they believed it was a much more connecting form to tell these mythologies to each other and to spread their religion through that. And so, as a result of that, it was a lot more of a social thing and a lot more of a gathering and a lot more of a sit around the fire while I tell you how cool this one god is, or I tell you how mischievous the coyote is. And on top of that, it made it so that their tales could kind of get woven and intertwined and um, changed as things went. It also made it so that they could respect nature more because of the fact that that way they weren't writing it down on thousands of sheets of paper of dead trees. If they wrote it down at all, it was typically in the form of art and it was typically done on some sort of like leather or canvas type material. Um, and this once again shows respect for nature kind of thing. So those kinds of things need to be taken into account as well. Or you can straight up have them not even keep track of their religion and just go ham. Just do whatever they feel is best. Because those religions do tend to get lost easier though. So just be warned if you have one of those religions and you're like, by book 3, that religion might be toast. Because not keeping track of it does tend to cause problems. Heck, even with the indigenous peoples, unfortunately, a lot of languages were lost, and so because it was all oral tradition for the most part, a lot of their religion was lost. And it really sucks. It was a beautiful way of doing things, but unfortunately, it wasn't as tangible as some of the other religions, and so it faded. And that's important to keep into mind as you're building your universe as well. All right. Last thing on this point before I jump to a new point. How is the religion orchestrated? This is very important for your gods and goddesses of the pantheon. For example, there's the Pope in your Catholicism religions. And then in Greek mythology, there are different temples for each god and goddess. And you have some sort of worshiping patron there that has a bunch of various little students that he's going to slowly raise up and be like, this is how we do things here. And sometimes you even had oracles, aka people who got really, really high and told people stuff that they envisioned. But that's a different story. You can also, if you really want to delve into that, also include drugs in your religion because there are a lot of religions that include drugs. So don't be afraid to do that. I know some people shun that, but I'm like, it's just part of life. There are like at least 4 different religions I can name off the top of my head that it is part of their to consume drugs. So Um, that being said, the organization of your pantheon or of your single godhood oftentimes is represented in your leadership. So, like for example, with the Pope, single figurehead, just like the single god. Whereas with those with pantheons, have a bunch of different people worshiping, just like the pantheons. Um, you also want to look into what, if you have a pantheon, what are they the god of for the one that is the head of your pantheon? Because you will have a head of your pantheon. It's just part of life. We as humans like having someone in charge. Even if there's a pantheon of gods in charge, we like having a main one, right? And so even though Zeus was a pain in the patootie, um, and had way too many kids because he couldn't keep it in his pants, um, it's also interesting to note that that was kind of the guy they mainly worshipped, right? That was the big cheese. The guy in charge was this guy who was this kind of philandering crazy guy whose wrath could randomly strike you down at any moment because he's the god of weather and justice and fate. Can you believe that? What a guy, man. Can you just like, you're in charge of not only our fate but our justice system. Oh, and also you can strike us down with lightning if you so please. Like, can you imagine giving a guy that amount of power? But anyway, so they kind of demonstrated just what they thought of justice. You know, justice was striking people down, smiting people, you know. It had this kind of very powerful energy to it. And fate, you were destined to do this. You were fated to do that. You know, it's not just fate is wandering through and making choices. It's no, the choice was made long ago. You just didn't know it. You know, no agency here. Um, that's also a very interesting way of looking at it. Is destiny something you cannot escape? And Greeks kind of did believe that. Um, Keeping in mind, though, that with those kinds of things, those are the kinds of things you're going to want to keep track of, especially if you're doing a pantheon, because most gods are not in charge of just one thing. For example, Athena, goddess of war. She's not just the goddess of war, she's the goddess of war strategy, she's the goddess of wisdom. And technically, I know, you're probably saying Ares is the god of war. He was the god of violent, angry war. So they even have two different gods of war, technically.
Well, technically, Venus is more of like the strategy.
Exactly, that's my point. They're two different sides of war. One is stab the person, and the other is how do we stab the person in a tactical manner. So they're very different ways of looking at it, right? They're two sides of the same coin kind of thing. And then you have Aphrodite, who's like, I'm the goddess of love and beauty, but she also has a lot more to her than that. Those are just her two main things. If you look deep down, there's a lot of other things that she's in charge of. And so it's important to look at what are they in charge of. Another thing to look at is what the culture values the most. For example, in Norse mythology, they mostly value, yes, they valued war. That's why Thor was one of their main gods, because he was the one who was smashing up the place, right? And that was their thing. Go pillage and plunder to your heart's content. That was Vikings. And yet their main king god was Odin, god of wisdom. And so they kind of had this warring idea of, hey, be wise above all else. But also, pillaging and plundering, as long as it's done strategically, good idea. Strategic war crimes, exactly. That about sums up the Vikings. As long as it's strategic, do any war crimes you wish. Granted, they also had a very much higher respect for women. A lot of their gods respected the goddesses a lot more, and a lot of the goddesses had a lot more power to them. And heck, the women held most of the power in the relationship. The woman was the one who could declare a divorce, not the man most of the time. And the woman, because of the fact that she was the one staying back at the village, was often the one who gave the man an allowance, things like that. She was mostly in charge. Um, and so it's kind of these funny, weird social structures that you can fiddle around with. With your pantheon, make sure that whatever's in charge the most is what they fear slash revere. For example, they really were scared deadly straight of weather, lightning, thunderstorms. And so that's why he's in charge. And yet you have secondarily the god of death. Who doesn't fear death? And then you have third most powerful god being the god of the sea, Once again, this terrifying force that could just absolutely slam you under and kill you, right? And so you got to think about that. What is the most terrifying forces of nature in your universe? That's a good basis for your godly trio or quadrio, whatever you want to have it be. All right. Next, we're going to talk about monsters. Yes, question?
That's not a question.
Okay.
We can do it.
Statement works too. We haven't quite talked about it yet. I just said we're going to talk about monsters next. So.
I was gonna say, like the main fear, fear. One of like the main goddesses I have is the goddess of life. And I'm like, does that mean my people fear life?
Not necessarily. But I will say it is either something that they fear or that they, like I did say, fear or respect. So I think that's the main key is the or respect. I think the main reason why people don't have goddesses or gods of life in charge is purely because of the fact that a lot of people see life as kind of just you live, you die, it's trivial, you know. And so as a result, having a god of life be in charge is an interesting twist on things. Because it shows that they respect life a lot more, and I would expect them to actually not kill people probably as much, have a lot better justice system, purely because of the fact that if you revere life that much, you wouldn't want to kill someone. That's my thoughts on that. So I think it's also what do they respect? What do they see as being powerful? And what is the most powerful force in their lives? So there's that too. All right, next we're going to talk about monsters. So, monsters truly are based on things that people fear. With the gods, it's things they fear or respect. With monsters, it's what they fear. And oftentimes it's based in a combination of actual real monsters, aka animals, right? A great example of this actually is in Japanese culture. In a lot of European culture, wolves are seen as evil, right? You got Little Red Riding Hood, you got Fenrir, who's supposed to eat the world, you've got all these killer, terrible, terrifying wolves. And yet, in Japanese culture, wolves are sacred. Why are wolves sacred in Japanese culture? Because of the fact that they had rice fields. Do you know the answer? No? Okay. That's okay. I was like, if you do know the answer, please tell me. Because I would love to have you guys hop in. But it's mainly because they had rice fields. And animals like boars and sheep and things like that would go and eat all the rice paddies. And then they would starve. And that sucked. And so wolves were seen as sacred because they came in and ate them. And they were like, woohoo, we're not going to starve. Thank you, bro. And so as a result, they saw them as super, super sacred because of the fact that, and wolves were seen as messengers from the divine. And so in some ways, any sort of villager that was rampaged by a boar and had no food left was seen as like kind of abandoned by the gods. But anyone who had wolves nearby was like, we have been blessed by having these guardian wolves that help watch over our rice fields and make sure that all those dang pesky predators of our rice fields are staying out. Because with European culture, you had a lot more of this, we're going to raise the animals, we're going to keep them safe and make them into meat and things like that. In Japan, it was primarily fish. And so as a result, they didn't do as much of the agricultural, let's raise like herds of things because they had rice, and rice was too vulnerable to those kind of creatures. As a result of that, wolves were awesome. They were super cool. But then you have other ones like foxes, where foxes could help cull those kinds of populations, but they also could come and steal your chicken's eggs. And as a result, they were seen as tricksters because they did both. They both got rid of the problem and caused the problem. And that's part of the reason why in a lot of cultures foxes are seen as that way. However, keep that in mind that they were also seen as very sacred because they could get rid of those kind of populations. And so they were seen as kind of these fickle beings where they were sacred, but you didn't want to piss them off because then they come and eat all your chickens. um, with that being said, a lot of monsters do represent those kinds of things. If you look in Greek mythology, for instance, a lot of snake monsters exist. Snakes are kind of terrifying, right? They bite you, you dead. Ah. And so a lot of religions have snakes as the big bad evil thing because they're this tiny little thing that you don't see coming and then nope, you dead. And so they're seen as cunning, they're seen as suspicious and stealthy. And if all snakes were like garter snakes and not poisonous, I honestly don't believe that would be the case. I think that snakes might actually have a totally different look if they weren't, some of them, venomous. Like, that's just my theory. Maybe I'm wrong, but
For example, like snakes that are like cute.
yeah, exactly. That's my point, though. If they were all like that, they were all just adorable little hunters. Hey, you got rid of the mice. Good job, buddy. But because some of them are venomous, we kind of just all lump them together, you know? And that's kind of the thing you're getting with monsters is these generalities. The reason why Norse people feared the wolves so much is because, again, they had these herding cultures. They raised horses, they raised cows, they raised sheep. And so as a result of that, they didn't do a lot of farming. Vikings rarely farmed. They mostly went and stole a bunch of stuff from other cultures. And they were like, sweet, you had giant wheat fields. I'm going to take all your wheat now. And they rarely farmed. They had a few farmers, but that really wasn't part of their culture. As a result, wolves were terrifying because they would come in and slaughter half their sheep, and now they were starving. And that sucked. So, as a result, I would like you to also look at what their food culture is like, because that is going to help determine what kind of animals they fear and therefore what kind of monsters you might want to create. Or if you have something totally fantasy, you could make up your own. Make up your own predators. Make up your own cool, weird kind of like plant. Maybe you have a plant that, I don't know, secretly it will not sprout unless you have a snail run over it. So snails are sacred or something weird like that. I don't know. Like
Religion to snails.
religion of snails. I don't know. You can have all sorts of crazy things in a fantasy universe. That's the beauty of fantasy is you can take an idea and make it totally different. But you got to keep in mind those magical kind of restraints and constraints. A great example of this was a show I was watching recently. Talked about how only magic users could communicate over long distances. And he wanted to change that. He wanted to make it so anyone could communicate over long distance. And the only reason this hadn't been done before is because normal people didn't have the magic in them to be able to do it. So you need to have some way of harnessing the magic without possessing magic. Whereas if everyone had magic, that wouldn't even be a thing that he aspired to do, right? They'd just be poof. We all have magic. Hey, bro, 200 miles away. Come pick me up. You know, like, um, so do think about how your magic system works and why that works so well. And why do people fear what they fear or respect what they respect? And how does that change how they look at things? All right, last thing, most fun thing in my opinion, holidays. Because as you may have noticed, lots of holidays are based in either massive, cool events that are cultural, or they are based in religion. And so, as a result of that, you want to take a look at that. Is there some sort of god or goddess that is super, super powerful? And so they're like, hey, every spring we worship this god by doing a little festival thing. And what kind of things would that involve? For example, if this is the god of mushrooms, maybe they'll get high on mushrooms and dance around in a circle. I don't know, you know. Gotta come up with something, right? But then you can also show what they value culturally by having different ideas for what historical events they worship, kind of in a way. You know, certain historical events may have been, for example, I know it's controversial, but I'm going to say it Thanksgiving. Let's be real, it's a little controversial. We are technically celebrating the overtaking of an indigenous people. That's a little messed up. And yet that's not how people view it, right? And that they've kind of changed the narrative to be like, hey, this is about us surviving and being able to thrive in this foreign land finally. And so you can even have some things like that, where maybe a cultural event is a little off. I know they did this very well in Avatar: The Last Airbender. You know, the whole let's have Avatar Day, and he's like, sweet, they're celebrating the Avatar, and then they're burning effigies of the Avatar, and he's like, ah, hold up. So you can have misinterpretations too of what happened, or misinterpretations of how a certain person was, or misinterpretations of how things were that actually turn into a holiday because people are so excited or amped up about it, you know? Um, so you can also show what people value through those holidays and show how they want to show respect for that. Do they do some sort of feast? Do they throw flowers in the air? Do they run around and have a parade? You know, these all can convey different things for different holidays and different fun things. And some of them can even be based in religious things that have faded out of phase. For example, Halloween. That's entirely 110% a pagan holiday. Wearing the masks in order to avoid spirits, going from door to door to get treats, the jack-o'-lanterns, like every little last bit of it is 100% Celtic slash Druidic mythology. And so you can have even older religions that have gone out of phase and become just kind of a funsy festival or different things in your world where you're like, they no longer believe this, but they have a really cute little festival at the end of the year about it. um, and then you can also have ones that are holidays that people still believe in, like with Christmas. Christianity is still incredibly prevalent, and yet it's become this kind of really interesting holiday with all these figures like Santa Claus that people believe in, and you're like, wait, I thought this was about the birth of Christ. But okay. And it can kind of become this weird, kind of funky thing as it evolves over time. All sorts of evolutions of religions can develop very curious holidays. So if you want to develop even some of your own traditions, weird stuff where it's like every time that we walk through this field and see a bunny rabbit, someone has to go fight someone. I don't know. Like you can come up with weird, even little tropey things, kind of like the whole kissing under the mistletoe thing. That was actually a pagan thing that people kind of went, oh, originally mistletoe was used in these like fertility rites. Instead, let's just be cute and kiss. And so you can warp that, change that, kind of rethink how your things work. All right. Okay, that was the last I'm going to say on that. Does anyone have any questions about building mythology, etc., or not so much? I figured not so much. I tried to fit in as much as I could while still being as vague as I could, so I'm not just talking forever. Um, all right, last little thing before I shut off the video. Reminder, the first chapter contest, the entries are due on the 20th of December. Again, you can turn in any genre of first chapter as long as it's not fan fiction. The only reason we say that is because every other contest we allow fan fiction. So, I figured this is the one where I can say no. Yeah, have fun with it though. Do whatever genre you like as long as it's not more than 3,000 words. We're good. You can have it be as short as you'd like, but keep in mind that 1,500 words is typically the recommended, mainly just because trying to get things across can be hard in less than that amount of time. Doesn't mean you can't, though. I will say if you don't do 1,500 words and you don't quite make it as good as it should be, you will lose some points. But if you do it in like 1,000 words or less and you absolutely nail it, that's fine. Like, go for it. You might not even lose points in that scenario because I realize on the form it says you may lose points if you don't follow the guidelines. That is true for all the guidelines except that one. That one is just simply if you can do well under 1,500, be my guest. But it's super hard, so I wouldn't recommend it. um, all right, so I'm going to turn the video off now, and you guys can write whatever you'd like, ask about whatever you'd like, um, and yeah, make sure you do get those in before the 20th if you can, because this obviously the sooner the better as far as grading for me. But take all the time you need if you really feel you need that much time. All right, I'm going to turn off